Dada P is a yogic monk and the chief inspiration for the yoga ecology movement. Growing up in apartheid South Africa gave him very personal experiences of the inequities and injustices prevalent in our society. His search for a philosophy that integrates practical spirituality with social justice led him to Ananda Marga. He then quit his engineering career and undertook his monastic training in India. For the past 30 years, he has been teaching meditation, yoga, and the philosophy of neo-humanism, as well as running many social justice projects around the world. While currently based in Australia, he splits his time between Australia and Canada. Today he will give us food for thought in the way we think about ourselves and society, and how we can usher in a new chapter in our human story.
Namaskar. I greet you with the traditional yogic greeting of Namaskar, which means I greet the divine consciousness in you with the divine charms, the expansiveness, the inclusiveness of my mind, and the love and the cordiality of my heart. I greet you. Namaskar. So this is the second event in Yoga Ecology, and I'm going to be sharing my screen with you. For context, please watch the video Yoga, a Revolution in Social Thought. Search Yoga Ecology, one word, in YouTube or BitChute and you'll come to our channel. Now I'm very happy that you decided to join us at Yoga Ecology for this event, and I'm pretty sure you'll see something quite unique. So what are your takeaways at this event? One, powerful tools for your personal development. Two, with yoga's impact on personal well-being already quite massive. We at Yoga Ecology are going to explain why it's going to make an even bigger impact on social transformation. This is a unique opportunity to peek ahead and participate in a once-in-a-millennia series of events that are unfolding as we speak and change the course of human history. A truly unique insight into a better future for all beings on this planet. While society has generally evolved gradually, there were times when large changes happened rapidly. Our current social development, mental evolution, and technological development, together with other factors which I'm not going to go into now, have created circumstances where we are able to make such an evolutionary jump. We are at such a time that yoga calls the great exception, where the exception, not the norm, is the rule. Let's briefly recap from last event. We looked at the root cause of our societal and environmental problems. We introduced a yogic perspective in addressing them. We explored yogic concepts applied to social transformation. In this event, we are going to delve a little bit deeper. We as individuals, we live by story. The underlying ideas, the conditioning we imbibe from about year 1 to about 7 years old, it remains largely in our subconscious layer of mind. Though subconscious, it powerfully generates the self-talk that goes on in our minds for our whole lives. Most people go through their whole lives unaware of their own story. Once we become aware of our story, we can change our story or parts of our story. It is the same with society. To address the inability of the current system to create a caring, inclusive social order, we need to understand the underlying assumptions. The assumptions generate the social psychology, or the story if you want. The social psychology creates the social system in which we live. We look at some of the assumptions to see whether we are living an outdated story. We looked at two assumptions. views: materialism and biological or genetic determinism. Materialism says that the emergence of the universe is an event of chance, a random event, and there is nothing more than matter. Then biological determinism means you and your mind are an emergent property of the body and the brain. That means when the body dies, there is nothing else. That's it. So these are two assumptions and not scientific facts. The assumption, the dogma of materialism, justifies the philosophy behind competitive capitalism, separating us into small units of competition. This view on life gives rise to the psychology of scarcity, unbridled individualism. Through fear, it justifies the need for accumulation of wealth and resources. It amplifies greed because there is no larger meaning in life. My dear sisters and brothers, the fragmentation of materialism is the cause of 99% of the problems we face. And while you may or may not see it, this fragmented perspective of life is taking us over the precipice. And in my opinion, materialism is the asbestos of the 21st century because it slowly corrodes our social cohesion. Let's look at yoga's story. The story of yoga is based on two foundational concepts. All life, all matter emerges out of a non-material, infinite state of being called consciousness. And from this, the philosophy, the practice of neo-humanism emerged, one of intrinsic love and of inclusiveness. Through 7,000 years of research and practice, the yogis have accessed this state of unmitigated consciousness and brought to humanity the powerful science of yoga and meditation as tools of personal development. And I can tell you from my own experience, it is transformational. One day, walking along my path, I came across the cosmic singularity casually crossing my path, and it changed my life. So here's the yogic definition of consciousness: a state of being beyond the physical and mental dimensions, which is the foundation of all existence. It is the ultimate common point of all being, animate and inanimate. But before we go further, let's look at what some of the most eminent scientists of our time have to say about this. Max Planck won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1918. You may not have heard of him, but many of the advanced electronic gadgets that you use today are possible because of his work with quantum physics and quantum theory. And he said matter is derived from consciousness. In 1933, Erwin Schrödinger won the Nobel Prize in Physics together with Paul Dirac for the model of the atom that we still use today. Now, according to him, consciousness is singular, fundamental, and cannot be accounted for in physical terms. David Bohm, a protege of Einstein, one of the most significant theoretical physicists of the 20th century. And you can see he's clearly saying that the view of separateness is an illusion. So we see that the yogic idea of consciousness is supported by the thinking of some of our most eminent and prominent scientists. Yet we are hurtling down the path of fragmentation through the dogma of materialism. Now let's look at neuroscience. Neuroscience has made much progress in the understanding of the brain. However, because it is trapped in the dogma of materialism, it has made very little progress in the understanding of the mind. Up until recently, neuroscience saw the mind as an emergent function of the brain, whereas yoga says that the mind has its own existence, its own structure, separate from the brain. Only now, neuroscientists like Dr. Peter Fenwick, after 50 years of dedicated research, are coming around to the yogic concepts that consciousness exists independent of the brain. So yoga says that consciousness underpins all of our day-to-day reality. However, it is so subtle that it cannot be contained by anything physical or mental. To get a sense of this, at times you would have had a song in your mind, very clear, But when you tried to vocalize it, it just did not come out right. At other times you would have felt something, and when you tried to express it, the words just could not fully express your feeling. Now with consciousness, which is a state beyond the mind, how more difficult that would be to express. Using the mind when in that state of being, you're beyond the mind. Thus, mind is incapable of expressing it. You can only be consciousness. And as a being of consciousness, you are immortal. You may lose the body when you die, but at death, you transcend the human experience of separateness and return to the state of unbounded consciousness. Still, like we can describe fire to someone who has not seen fire by describing its quality, so that when one comes across it, one can recognize it. The yogis do the same with consciousness. But remember, the description is not the thing, just like the map is not the territory. So if it is beyond mind, how do you access it? The yogis, through thousands of years of yoga research, have come up with an amazing set of transformative tools, some of which Didi will go into. Remember, I said that yoga had two foundational concepts, and the first one was consciousness, while the second is neo-humanism. When we are born, we become self-aware and develop the protective sense of self, I, and mine. Well, neo-humanism is the concept that we can expand that sense to include first all human beings. Then we extend and expand that even further to include all animals, and we expand that even further to include all plants. Based on this, we create an inclusive, caring social order. You will begin to see that yoga is much more than just what happens on a yoga mat, and that social justice is intrinsic to the philosophy of yoga. When we apply yoga theory and practice to the development of society, we begin to write the greatest human story waiting to be told. Instead of fighting against an exploitative system, we take the initiative. When all life emerges out of a singular consciousness, then let us together co-create a universal bill of rights that expresses our basic needs and the highest aspiration of each one of us at all areas of life. These areas that you see are only some of them. However, the universal bill of rights, through statements of principles, shall cover every aspect of life on this planet. It is a set of inalienable written principles that explicitly guarantees the basic necessities of life to all, creates a progressively increasing purchasing power for all, and it guarantees the right to self-actualization, the experience of unmitigated consciousness, infinite happiness. That is the right of all human beings, and it shall unite us, because when it includes all human beings, animals, plants, and the biosphere, no one gets left behind, and it will necessarily include a healthy environment as a basic right to life. Thus, it creates real social cohesion and stability. While the concept of Bill of Rights is not new, it is the first time in human civilization that a Bill of Rights is anchored on the fundamental nature of being, consciousness, the common point of all being. Why is that important? It expresses new values describing and protecting the needs of all at all levels: material, mental, emotional, and consciousness. It creates meaning in people's lives. I am not just an economic fragment, but a being in finite consciousness. It facilitates certainty and stability in society. Now, with the last point, with yoga's deep insight into the structure and nature of mind, yoga says that if the infinite power of mind is not directed towards infinite consciousness, it will be directed towards matter, which is finite. So when the infinite power of mind is applied to finite matter, you get an insatiable tendency to accumulate finite wealth and resources. You will see people who are wealthy wealthy want to become even wealthier, and countries that are wealthy justify the need to increase their wealth even more. This is the deep psychological cause for the tremendous disparities that the world experiences. Imperialism. This also requires a new psychology of leadership based on real, universal service-centeredness, meaning only those who have already demonstrated the practice of neo-humanism or universal humanism will be allowed at the helm of leadership. Yoga calls these service-oriented leaders Sadvipras. They will use the principles of the Universal Bill of Rights to develop policies which guide the creation of laws that work for all of us, a caring, benevolent social psychology. As part of this event, following the focus on health and environment, I will upload a video where I discuss these two aspects as principles in the UBR. Clearly, these two factors are linked with other factors like education, poverty, and others. So we have to consider the whole. We facilitate collective discussions in all areas of social order until they are all addressed as principles in the Universal Bill of Rights. You would know this from the previous event. When you generate revolutionary ideas, then you see this social breakdown. And I hope that the 10% that supports and acts are among you today. When we only fight against the system, we have already lost the initiative. Even though we are the 99.9%, it is the 0.1% that has been controlling the narrative, the story. And you cannot fight a narrow idea or story with guns and bombs. You can only fight it with a greater, more expansive idea, because ideas are embedded in people's minds. Come, let us stand together, take the initiative, and change the old destructive narrative. Let us rejuvenate our social vitality as we stand for the whole, not just a fragment. Then, my dear sisters and brothers, when the 0.1% will ask, what do you want? You can say the establishment of a universal bill of rights. If what I say makes sense, join us at Yoga Ecology in developing and promoting the universal bill of rights across all people, all countries, all land across the planet. Because if not you, who? And if not now, when? My dear sisters and brothers, the destructiveness, the futility of materialism is over. We begin to synthesize a new social order based on consciousness, the crimson dawn of a new era for all living beings. And I bid you namaskar and be well.